Hi, everyone. My name's Leana Pande. I'm an artist. I'm working with the Everhart Museum to teach you guys this watercolor bird painting. I'm an artist and I also have a background in science. So while I also do art, I went to Wilkes University and graduated with a degree in neuroscience and psychology. I'm studying to be a doctor, so I'm working hard on that right now. I'm pre-med. But in art, I have a lot of different skills I've learned. I'm self-taught. So I know acrylic and oil painting and gouache and pencil and pen and stuff like that. But of course, I know watercolor because that's what I'm going to teach you guys today. I have this floral bird type theme painting because, you know, it's art in bloom and we're celebrating spring. It'll be something great to learn. This is just a basic beginner's type of watercolor painting. Nothing too complicated. If you've never done this before, you should be able to pick stuff up. So I have just a standard sheet of watercolor paper with me, not regular paper, because then obviously the water would make the paper too wet and it would break a little bit. And then I just have two brushes with me, a larger round watercolor brush and a smaller one. You can have any sizes. I think it'll work because we'll work on the shapes together. And I used green and like orange and yellow to make my birds, but you could do this with different shades of red or different shades of blue, and I think it would turn out nice. So we'll start with just going from the lighter shades to the darkest shades because there's really no erasing when it comes to watercolor. Let me just show you. We'll start with our fresh sheet of paper and our lightest shade, and you can layer on top of watercolor, which is really nice. So I'm just going to wet my brush first, dipping in the water and then picking your color. I'm using just a regular, primary color shade of yellow to start with. And we're going to make sort of in the upper right-hand corner a little circle shape for our bird. And, keep re-wetting your brush and putting it in the yellow paint as you need to get more color. I'm just doing this on the dry paper, not wet. It would not help us to create the shapes if the paper was wet because it would bleed. And then from the yellow circle, I'm making sort of a little bump. That's going to be his head. It's just, it doesn't have to be a perfect little bump. It could just be this little blob. And I'm spreading around the color evenly. And then I'm going to make sort of a triangle extension from his end here, which will be his tail. And we'll layer some more colors on top of that. So I'm just filling it in. All right, and we'll start with another bird in the bottom left-hand corner. Just another little circle here, same method, but he'll be facing the other direction. So I've got this little circle drawn here, and I'll give him another little bump for his head facing this way. It's sort of just like a C shape or like a frowny face. And then we'll have a triangle coming off the bottom here. So that's the overall shape of the bird. Just a couple geometric shapes to line up together, nothing too complicated. I think everyone's drawn a circle and a triangle. Okay, now we're just going to fill that in. And I'm keeping it pretty light because if you want it darker later, you can always add more, but it's really hard to take out color from watercolor. So those are our little yellow birds. And obviously, if your paper is like mine, it's still wet. I wouldn't start on like any of the black or any of the other colors immediately that we have layered on top of it in the painting. So here, I wouldn't start on these, just leave them as they are or it'll bleed and it really won't turn out the way you want it to. So going from the lightest to the darkest color, we've done the yellows here. Next, we'll do just sort of leaves all over the place. We're not going to draw the branches first because since the branches are darker, they'll blend into the leaves. So we'll just start off with like, I would take whatever the lightest shade of green is that you have, or you can mix green with yellow, or you mix green with a lot of water to create a lighter shade. So start with your lightest shade again. I'm just going to get, I have like it's kind of a lime green color, but not as intense. And I'm just gonna take the edge of my larger brush and sort of make leaves like this. I'm not going directly facing down. I'm using like the edge and using the shape of the brush to create a leaf shape. I'm just patting it on the paper like that. So I think I'll want a little bunch of leaves there too. And you can pick where you want your leaves. They don't have to be anywhere particular. But at some point you want to think about the balance of your page, how much paint you have on the top and the bottom of your page and the left and the right. You don't want everything you have on the painting to be on one side and then like nothing on the other. So as you're creating your little bushels, think about that. I'm just putting little dots on the page. I'll add some more here. And the good part about the leaves is we won't have to wait for these to dry. Since they're all green and we don't have to worry about it running, we can just layer in other colors on top. So I'm just picking out some more spots here. Maybe I'll put some like right next to the bird, or if you have some of your bird dry, which mine is here, maybe you want to put a little bit of the leaves on the bird. So he looks like he's hanging out behind some of the plant. But as you start getting darker, so I'll mix some of my lighter shade with a little bit of a darker shade now. Of course, there's a lot of water in that. Then I can just go on top and add it in, and it looks like I have this like really full branch on a tree. It's a nice day out today too, so you can go out and look at what you painted basically. So I have all these leaves I'm doing. And make sure you're varying the different shades of green. I've started just directly using some of the darker ones. It might help you, this is optional, you don't have to do this, to think about where do you want more dark leaves. Like if you're thinking maybe the sun is over here, maybe you want the left-hand side of the page to have more darker colors. And we can wait for these to dry and do more defined shapes on top, but while it's wet, it's also fun to just blend a couple of these leaf shapes together. And don't worry about the way they look because nobody's ever looking that detailed at a single leaf. You can just have sort of an array of these different shapes. All right, so on my page, the birds are just about dry. Well, one is. But make sure you're not starting on anything that's not dry in between. So what I can do is I can add a little bit of other colors to my bird. So I'm just taking like a little bit of orange because that's, you know, it would mix well with yellow. And I'm gonna add it to like the bottom of the bird. Give it a nice color. Just while we wait for the top to dry because we need to do all those black details on it. Okay, so I'll add some more orange on the bottom here. I already put a leaf there, but that's all right. I can paint around it. And the shape should go sort of like that. You can work on changing the shape of your bird while you're there. So notice there's sort of a line here that's drying and there's a line around the edge. You can change this a little bit if you just wet the tip of your brush and sort of gently tap the paper like that. you can sort of change the way things have been. I mean, it won't fully erase anything you've done if you feel like your birds have gotten just way out of hand or way too big, but it will change just a little bit of what you're doing so you can alter the shape. And I'm sort of doing that. I'm using just no color, but just a little bit of water on the tip of the brush to blend in the orange we added. This is still wet, and I'll add just a little bit of orange, maybe more. Maybe I want a more vibrant bird. And I can do the same on the other side. Just thinking about, maybe I created a little bit of a hunchback bird here. So I'll add a little bit more yellow and I'll make his head go up a little bit more, give him a better neck. And I'll give him a little bit more color because he was sort of a pale yellow. I'll add some orange into that. And you can just sort of let the color bleed into the yellow nicely and have them blend. And if they're not blending on their own like they are here, I can just add a little bit of water and spread that out with my brush. I'm kind of fanning the color outwards like that. And I can take these hard edges and just use a little bit of water on my brush and go like that. And it's sort of a process of getting these layers of color on top of each other. Because if you add too much, and at some point I decided I wanted to change the shape of one of these birds, that wouldn't really be an option. So work on those leaves. Just keep stippling in those leaves and maybe waiting for the bird to dry. I'll add some other shades in here. I'm adding like a burnt sienna color. All right, so the top of my bird is dry, so I'll take a look at some of the black paint. I'm just adding a ton of black paint to my brush right now. And we're gonna start doing these smaller details up here. And just like a thin coat, because we can do all these lines and streaks afterwards, but you want to get the shapes now. So I'm going to sort of even out the top like that. And I'm just gently going. I'm not going to do it super dark because I want to add fun detail with the shades. And I'll leave the bottom of this without the black paint so that you can sort of see underneath the bird. It adds some perspective to it. I'm just going to give some more shape to the top of the head, maybe fan it like I'm doing sort of these curvy strokes like this. And I'll maybe extend that into his beak a little bit, but we can do that more detail later. And I'll make his head a little more round. All right, so we can let that layer dry and do that again on the other bird. So I'm just gonna get like a ton of black paint on my brush and create the shape of this bird now. All right, so I'm just gonna paint the top of this bird. I'm just doing an arch downward sort of with this one, and there's a lot less black on this bird. And the tail's gonna go off the page, but I'm gonna add it so you can see the edge of like the bottom of the bird from both sides. So just sort of a triangle outline that will add more detail to. And I'll do top down like that. And you can wait for that to dry and layer on top of your leaves for a minute. I'll give you a chance to do that and catch up if you aren't there. You can sort of make sure that the edges haven't blended in here, and if they are, we'll like leave them to dry like here, and then we'll add some detail so that we can show it separate. I'm gonna add some more leaves on mine, and I'm just using different shades of green. You can use different combinations of dark and light green to keep it together and make them look kind of cohesive but different. All right, and just gonna keep adding leaves. I'm adding less and less water so that we can get denser colors. The more water you add, the lighter the color is gonna be. And I'm just making little leaf blobs. Remember to vary your color, so I've used the darker green, and I'm gonna add the lighter green. At this point, your black parts of your bird should be mostly done. And we're switching back and forth only because you want one part of your bird to be dry, and then you want your leaves to be dry to create these different shapes, because I can add as many of these same paintbrush shapes to make leaves at the same time as I want. But if it's all wet at the same time, they're sort of going to bleed together. So I need to wait for them to dry to keep layers. So that's why we're sort of bouncing back and forth. So you can keep adding leaves and get the shape you want, or you can move on to the bird. I'll give you a little bit of time to catch up later. So I'm going to make the edges of this bird darker up on the top. I'm adding a lot more paint and a lot less water to my brush to get the darker pigment. And I'm going to just sculpt the triangle of the beak a little bit. So I have my thicker brush, but I can also use my smaller round brush, and that might make it easier for me because we're getting into the detailed parts. I'm just going to take the tip and start doing these like broad strokes across the back of the tail. And they don't have to be very precise because you're just adding detail and texture. I'm just doing these long lines. And you want to leave some of this lighter black shade because you need to be able to save room for the eye. And that's just going to be one dark black eye. So I'm just doing a little dark circle here. And if that dries lighter, we can come back and layer it. But for now, that little dot's fine. I might shape his face a little bit more so it curves down here. Curves there. You want sort of his wing to show, so you're going to have like a curve this way. And then you can have a curve here on the other bird. So this one curves sort of angled to the right, and this one curves angled to the left based on their directions. So while that dries and we can take another crack at the details, I'll move to the top bird. And we'll do this triangle sort of like like an L. And I'll kind of outline the top. A little bit more water. And the branches are absolutely last because of what you saw with the eye. Black just sort of sucks away all the color, and if you make a mistake with your leaves, you want to have the chance to fix that, or not really even mistake because you can sort of change these, but maybe you want to change the shape. And I have to keep adding shadows in what I think are going to be the darker spaces. And this can be modified a little bit once I add the branches. It doesn't have to be exactly the way I want it, but for the most part, it's easier to change once before I'm adding the branches. So let me make sure that there's a drier spot to start. I'll have, as you remember from the beginning painting, the final product will have like sort of a long branch here, and then I'll have his legs kind of grabbing onto it, and I have a little baby legs reaching out that's probably starting from behind the bird. Couple branches here. They don't have to be exactly the same, but just having these branches in different positions that orient with your leaves is helpful. And we'll add a couple leaves on top of that too. So I forgot about this little bushel. I'll give them some detail. The branches we're going to do, you can use brown and you can use black, either one, or you can use both to sort of create more shadow. So I'm going to use sort of just a dark brown shade. It doesn't have to be any one in particular. And I'm going to do a long branch going down. And of course, this will take some time to keep adding pigment, keep arching down. It doesn't have to be any specific shape. It's just a twig. So you can move it down like this. And then I'm going to have one that he's sitting on where this blob kind of went. So I'll have just a long branch this way. And I'll add one here where these leaves are going to go. Maybe one that kind of goes back there. We're just putting these birds in the middle of a tree. Maybe and a lot of branches have these kinds of V points where twigs kind of come off from there. So I'm going to add some V's to the lone branches I've made. and make sure all of the leaves sort of have somewhere it looks like they're starting from. I'll do the same thing up here. And we don't have to show a ton of them because I made this like sort of bushier, so maybe the branches disappear behind the leaves and kind of reemerge out here. And I'll add some V's to make it a little more natural. These are just twigs coming off. Your twigs can look a little bit different, but it's just the general idea that these are sort of the shapes and a nice way for it to look. And make sure you have some sort of space where you know you could put your bird's legs in, its little feet, because those will also be in black, so they'll be sort of last. If there's any part that your twigs are on top of some leaves and you can still see the leaves showing through, grab some more brown watercolor and use a little bit less water and more pigment and just go on top of the leaves. So I'm just gonna go back over some of these parts because I don't want the leaves showing through. All right, and now I can make some of these parts darker. You can do this while it's still wet or while it's dry. It's up to you, but I'm gonna add a little bit of blue to the brown and a little bit of black, not too much, and make some of the parts darker and show some shadow. So I'm adding a little bit of blue and black. You can mix it together separately, or you can mix it together on this. But as it bleeds together on the twigs and the sticks, it looks kind of nice. Then I'll add a little down here, up here, especially on this side because I decided this is going to be like my darker side. And there. And I'll add a little bit here. Maybe I want to make it easier for my bird to stand on that branch. All right, so going back to the bird now, a lot of your bird should be dried. Some parts I'm gonna blend together and some parts I can add more detail on. So for instance, I'm gonna make his face have a little less detail, have it a little bit less distracting to the eye. This side, we needed to fix the eye, so I'm just gonna take the pigment and go around like that. Now his eye looks fine. Working with the wet on dry looks a little bit better there. And that's pretty much it for the birds part. You can add a couple more leaves now to sort of go around where you did the branches. So I'm just adding a lot of pigment and making it darker and sort of making it make sense for where I had these branches end up. Maybe a couple leaves up top, a couple on top of here because this twig didn't blend quite the way I wanted it to, and maybe you saw that on yours. Some down here. I'll add a little bit here. And the more leaves you add, it really makes a difference to how detailed it looks. It seems really tedious to keep adding the same shape, but it builds up after a while and the layers look nice all together. And the more you add, certain parts will look darker and certain parts will look lighter because you're not adding it all in the same spots. Like these are still lighter and just some parts look darker. And the only thing really left to do is we're gonna do the legs for the bird. So make sure you've definitely got the smaller brush out for this part. I've just sort of done like a backwards L shape, and his little leg goes down like that. And then maybe you want to put sort of a little curvy line for his legs or for his claws. So one there, and then maybe I want one kind of behind this twig, and then one like there. Then I can do the same here. If at this point you realize like none of your branches are anywhere near where your bird could be sitting, that's okay. Just add a branch, just take out some brown paint and draw a line. You can add another little L shape. These ones are like the right face, they're not backwards L's. So just adding some talons there. And that's about your bird. So these are about how they can look. You could add some flowers too. That's what I had in my original painting. And they don't need to be complicated. They could just be little, basically the same shapes as the leaves. And you can add them where you have space. But the good thing is we've made it super green. So wherever you add these little shapes, they're just, you know, the same shape as your brush. And while they're wet, you can add a little bit of orange. I'm just using the same orange I even used on the bird, and adding it to the bottom and letting it blend up. We add a little more orange there. And help them out if you need it. I'm just adding plain water between these two and letting the blending happen for itself. And that should be your entire bird. If you want to add more flowers, you can. If you want to add more leaves, you can. But basically, that's all you have to do to paint a nice little floral bird scene. I'm glad you guys could join us. I'm sorry there were some technical difficulties along the way, but I hope you learned something great. Thanks for joining us.